Hi, everybody's on here is always asking about different types of banjos, and so I have a few different types of banjos in my possession today, and I'm going to show you uh, what they sound like and my idea of the good strong points and the weak points of the banjos, starting from basically the lower end to the higher end. This is a type of banjo that I probably wouldn't spend more than $50 to $100 on. It's called a hook and shoe. It's specifically called a shoe because these components here are the shoes. These are the hooks. There's no real flange, so to speak. This is the rim, the hoop. The hoop is actually attached by these hooks, but they're attached onto the side with these shoes. The shoe is attached to the resonator, or the rim, sorry. And in this case, the rim is an aluminum, but most of the time it's a wood. And what this creates is kind of a woody sound. It doesn't have that really crisp attack. And I'm missing a 5th string peg. It's just kind of it's fallen out. I have to fix this banjo. So it has a woody tone. You call it a woody tone. It doesn't have that sharp attack, as I said. It has not bad sustain on this one. This one has the guitar tuning pegs. If we turn it, we see that these are kind of the cheaper tuning pegs. They when they wear so that you can't tighten them. This kind of wears away, and basically the tuner is useless, has to be replaced. This is plastic head. This nut is plastic. You can see the bridge. The bridge is a cheaper bridge. These screws are actually screwed into the side of the resonator, so it's very difficult to pull a resonator off to tighten these, so that you tighten the head to make it a little brighter of a sound. So it is. This is a very much an intro banjo. So the next banjo is sometimes called a bottle cap banjo, and the reason is because the flange, and this is the banjo with the flange, looks like a bottle cap. So this is not a hook and shoe. As you can see, the hook actually, these hooks, again, that attach the hoop that tighten the head, are attached and through the resonator, and then there's screws on the other side of that, and I'll actually take it off and show you. Again, very similar tailpiece, lower end tailpiece. Both these banjos have resonators, so they're bluegrass banjos. Again, this has the cheaper, these are a little higher end tuning pegs, but they're still the cheaper guitar tuning pegs. They do have issues. They have a lot of give in them, so that you're not instantly tuning the banjo. There's a little bit of play in them before you actually start to hear a change in the sound. This is aluminum as well. You won't see these made of wood, so it's always an aluminum. And here's what they sound like. So these have a little bit more of an attack, a little bit of a brighter sound. It's not woody at all. It's very trebly. Now you can tighten the head. This head is actually a little bit loose, so you can tighten the head so that it's brighter sound, has a little more distinction between the notes, because it sounds really muddy right now. But the problem is with these hooks, they're extremely thin. And when you start tightening the head up, these hooks can break very, very easily. So I tend to keep it a little loose. These banjos, for some reason, go for about $150 to $200 used. They can be up to $250 brand new. They usually come with a gig bag and a starter kit. So here's what it looks like under the hood. There's the aluminum shell, and these are the hooks that you can tighten up. And you know what? I'm actually going to tighten these because I can loosen them up with my hands. So we'll tighten it up and see how the sound improves. Single coordinator rod. A lot of people will sometimes use these coordinator rods to kind of push on the shell, which can adjust the neck. That's really hard on the shell. They come with a truss rod, and you can kind of look at the truss rod as well. I actually tend to work as much as I can with the bridge and try and get the action that way. I'm not a huge fan. You can really mess up a banjo just fooling around with the coordinator rods and the neck as well with a truss rod. So if you're a beginner banjo player with not a whole lot of luthier knowledge, don't be too crazy. So let's see what it sounds like with a little bit of tightening up. So here's my little wrench, and I'm just going to tighten these just a little bit. I don't want to reef on them because I don't want to wreck these. Now, some people will say that you do them like a car tire. Oh, that's really loose. I tend not to, so I don't do cross the whole way. I just kind of do them in order, and I go around a few times. I'm not being crazy, not reefing on them. Just tight to the hand. I'm going to shut this off and finish the rest. So, when you buy a banjo at a store, that is basically the first thing that you should be checking. What happens is almost all banjos from the factory aren't tightened properly, and even in shipping, as they vibrate, these can come loose. Even over the years of playing, a banjo that's played a year or two, that can loosen as well. The head also loosens in climate. This is basically a huge barometer. So in different climates, this can change as well. It can get tighter, so you have to be careful of that, but it also can get looser, which is typically what happens. And then it gets floppy. You don't get that distinction. Now, so with a little bit of tightening, it's a little better. You hear a little bit of a distinction between the notes. It's sounding a little bit bluegrasser. As I said, that that banjo sometimes I do like the tone of a little better. This banjo, it would be more of a bluegrass sound though. The sharp attack and the fast decay, but a little bit of sustain to it. Especially better if it's in tune. Now this would be basically, those are beginner banjos. This is the upgrade to the intermediate. The intermediate has the more traditional Gibson type style flange. You can see that these hooks are a lot thicker. You can see them. So they won't bend, they won't wreck. Those J hooks will sharpen, they'll attach to that hoop a lot better. The hoop itself is a lot thicker. Those hoops are rather thin. This one actually has a tone ring in it. So the combination and a wood rim. So the combination of all of those, this is actually known as a two-piece flange. If you see So there's the flange, but there's also a hoop that goes around it. The hooks go through both the hoop and the flange. This provides a very good support system so that the flange doesn't lift up. Gibson, old pre-war Gibson banjos that weren't. This used to be the higher flange for Gibson banjos. The lower end flanges on the RB3s, they have a tendency to lift up. You can, especially here, you'll start to see them lift up. So this banjo is a Korean banjo, I believe, made in Korea. Does it say? So, a little more sustain, a little more attack, and really starting to have that kind of bluegrass snap. I'll pull the resonator off. We'll take a little look under the hood. So, dual coordinator rod system instead of the single coordinator rod system. And if you can look here, let's angle it. So this is known as a flathead tone ring. So the arch is this way, which creates a flathead. I used to have an arch top banjo, but I sold it. This also has the banjo head tuners, so they come flat out like this. These don't wear as much as those other ones do. You can adjust them a lot better. These ones, as soon as you start tuning, they actually start tuning the string. Unlike the other ones that have a little bit of a give, like in a steering wheel. There's a really tight steering wheel or a loose steering wheel. And the, of course, the tailpiece is a little higher end. This little flap opens up, and that's how you change the strings on them. Let's lift it up so that you can actually see that. So yes, this, the flange, there's the hooks that tighten up the hoop, that pushes down on the hoop, that makes sure that the head is nice and tight. You don't have to worry about tightening them. It's not going to wreck those hooks. You're not going to have issues with the flange. These were made in the 1970s. A lot of Japanese banjos, I can never pronounce it right, but Ada banjos, Ibanez, there's even some Gold Stars if you can find them. They're really good. Tokay, I had a banjo. So this is the kind of thing that you look for, that flange with a nice amount of hooks on them. Typically they'll be two-piece. The rim is a wood rim, but it is laminate, if you can actually see there. There's tons of, it's just basically, well, it's plywood, just a whole bunch of laminated rims, or laminated piece of wood stuck together, rounded off. That's the lowest aspect of this banjo, and kind of it's what makes it an intermediate banjo instead of an advanced. You could actually pop this rim out and put a really nice three-piece wood rim. They don't make like one piece because they're pretty thick, but you could put a three-piece wood rim in here. You could even upgrade the tone ring if you wanted, and that would make this a very, very nice banjo and approaching the more advanced banjo. But as it stands, these are good banjos. If you can find them, they can actually be found as low as $300. I picked up two of these banjos. This one specifically I got for about $300, but between $300 and $500 banjos. Recording Kings make banjos similar to this. The wood rims are actually 3-ply in those cases. It's the Madison banjo. They run $500, $600. So here would be intermediate advanced banjo. These were made by the Ode banjo. They're originally Odes, and then Baldwin bought out Odes, and then actually Gretsch bought them out, and whole story. Yes. Now this has a really nice ring to it. You can hear it has a nice resonation to it. Still has that attack to give it that sound of the banjo, but it has a lot more resonation to it. So which is sustain. Let's use the right word. And this has that big, huge, heavy ode tailpiece to it, and very nice banjos. They made some nice stuff. I'll open it up and we can see again what's under the hood. So here's what this banjo looks like under the hood, and how just some subtle changes can make the distinction between kind of the lower end to the intermediate. This is still a multiply rim, but it is not as laminate as I think there's how many? There's quite a few. I can't count them all. A different type of tone ring, so it's kind of their own creation of the tone ring. And but the flange is a super thick flange, so even though it doesn't have that tube and plate, this flange is not going to lift up whatsoever. These are actually very thick thick screws on here. Very nice J hooks. All together a I enjoy odes and Baldwins and banjos as well. The Juggernauts make great banjos. They're kind of all based the same way. Still, construction very similar. Wood, tone ring, top of the head. We got the hoops that are hooked on with the J hooks, and that makes it all tight. Again, these are kind of even nicer banjo tuning heads. These are up in the top end, so that again, when you start to turn them, you know that they're secure. Subtle shifts make sure that you can keep the banjo a little better in tune. Alright. I forgot to talk about the neck a little bit. The neck is an important component. You want to make sure that the neck is attached solidly to both that rim, to make sure that all the sound and it's tight so that it doesn't vibrate and make all sorts of noise that's annoying. The tighter it is, kind of the more it will add to the sound of the banjo. These are with the wood strip in the middle. That's how Baldwin Ode made these banjos. And again, very nice mahogany neck. Makes for a nice sound. The neck is very important for the feel. The banjo prior to that, it was a chunky neck. The finish was not as good. It's a little sticky. It's not as nice of a wood. All of that affects every component, basically affects the sound of a banjo, any acoustic instrument. And then this would be, I guess, so the price on an ode banjo is about, those banjos would go between $1,000 and $1,500, so that's kind of the range for those, the more advanced banjos. Now I'd call this, I guess, a pro banjo. This model was actually played by Kenny Ingram on stage, and professional banjo players would play these. These can range anywhere between $2,500 and as much as you want to spend. These have the nice sharp attack, but also the sustain. A lot of sound. That very sharp attack. The harder you pick, the more you play. It doesn't. But it plays nicely at a lower volume as well. So that's the big difference. This will not be wood. This will be a bone nut. Higher end, what's known as the Presto tailpiece. Again, the J hooks on this are the thick. This is a one-piece flange as well, but it's a little bit of a thinner flange, so this is very modeled after the pre-war Gibson banjos, like the RB3 and which is the RB75. This is a mahogany neck. This is known as a speed neck because all the finish has been stripped off of it, so that it's just kind of an oiled, so that it's you can see actually the finish right here, and then it stops the finish after that, so it's a little easier to play. Your hand doesn't stick. And again, we'll check under the hood. So this is a 3-ply rim, wood rim. The tone ring is a Burlisle tone ring, which only means something to nerdy banjo players. Again, the double coordinator rod. The way that the resonator sits is slightly different. It's actually not going through the holes. It's actually held on by an L bracket. And again, all of these components provide. So the tone ring was modeled after the pre-war Gibson banjo tone rings. This is very much modeled to be as close as possible. The tuners are Keith tuners, which I really enjoy. I like the gear ratio, and they have they're very nice, tightly made, and just all together a higher quality. But of course, that comes at a price. So I hope that kind of explains. So banjos like this, these would be Hubers. Neck fills are very, very different, but they're definitely higher end. Stelling, the higher end Deering models would fall into this category. Of course, the Gibsons. This one is specifically a Williams. Williams kind of took a bunch of different components that were made by, like the wood rims were Cox, the tone rings were Burlisle. I think Robin made the neck, so I think that's where the necks came from. And he just assembled, well, not just, he assembled them and made sure that everything was properly fit to provide the best sound as possible. So that is the interesting thing about a banjo. Each of those components, I could take this banjo apart and put in a different tone ring. I could take the rim off. I could put a maple neck on here instead of the mahogany neck that's on here right now. You can kind of mix and match pieces and get exactly what you want out of it. Kind of on the higher end. It's a little more difficult on those lower end banjos to be able to upgrade. But you can, starting at about those intermediate levels, I'd be able to take that Ada banjo apart and put in a different tone ring, or I'd be even able to take off the neck and put a two-piece flange neck on there, just making sure that all of those components fit on there as best as possible. But on the lower end banjos, it's typically just more cost effective to save up the extra couple $100 and buy a banjo kind of between that $500 and $1,000 range if you're looking at that. But yeah, hopefully now that you know a little bit what you're looking for, when you start to browse the classifieds or go to pawn shops, realize that the head, tightening that up can really affect the sound, bring out, like if I were to loosen this, I could make it sound like the very first banjo that we played, and set up incorrectly. Even a top end banjo, and definitely the intermediate banjos, can sound very poor. So realize that when you're looking, look at the components rather than initially the first sound when you pick it up, unless it's properly set up, which is likely not the case. Hope that helps you out. If you have any questions, feel free to drop me a line.